Hi friends, I'm excited to share a new layout with you today for our YouTubeSketchHop. Here are all the talented ladies. I have them linked below, and this is the sketch we're using. I got to choose the sketch this month and loved this layered look. And I got the sketch from Creative Scrappers, and it says Jenny Evans Blogspot. So that's who created the sketch. And I went through a bunch of papers, patterned papers, and pulled out several different things. So I've got some simple stories, magical birthday in there, me and my big ideas, Amy Tangerine, and then Cartabella bloom collection. So I went through and just pulled papers that I liked the colors. These are all kind of older papers, I think, maybe. I don't know. All my papers are mixed up. So I don't have them, by date, by collection. So I went through and just pulled papers that I liked and that I liked how they looked together. And the sketch has lots of different, it looks like patterned papers layered in different shapes and sizes. And so I went through and just kind of guesstimated what I thought from the sketch the sizes were. So that rectangle on back is 5 by 7, the striped paper. And then the two squares, I did 5 by 5 inches. And then that strip of paper is 10 inches long. And then I'm going to cut the notches out to make it look like a banner. And then the circle, I think the circle was like 4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and get that ready, kind of eyeballed it. I just measured an inch in from the center on the back of that paper to cut those little notches out. And I know it has a name, but I can't remember the name right now when you make the end of the banner look like that. Can't remember what it's called. So anyway, I'm going to distress the edges of all of these patterned papers before I do anything else with them, and make sure that I like how they look together. The distressing for me helps separate the layers from one another, because like right now as I'm looking at the screen, that lighter kind of aqua blue or turquoise color was kind of blending in. But when you start distressing the edges, it kind of sets the layers apart from one another, because you can see the depth and the texture on the edges of each of those. And then I'm also going to very lightly add a matte, a very thin, very thin black matte. And the reason I did this is because when I was looking at the sketch, I noticed that the layers, and it's actually probably just the software when she was creating the sketch, but the layers look like they kind of have a thick border around them, and I loved how that looked. So kind of like that black, those darker, thicker black lines around the different layers. And when I was noticing and thinking about, okay, what do I like about this sketch so much? That was one of the things that I noticed. And so I went, and not to every layer, I did not add black behind every layer, but some of them, I went and added that very tiny, thin layer of black behind it, because it kind of mimicked from the sketch that thick border. And then I pulled this paper. So the pictures that I'm scrapbooking are actually of my husband's birthday from this year. And I wanted to have a super fun, happy theme for his birthday photos. And so this paper, Happy, 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 I thought was super cute. And definitely kind of says what I'm wanting to say, right? So I went ahead and distressed the edges of that. I was going to leave that striped circle just with the one layer, but then when I had it on top of the other stripes and the hearts and all that stuff, I kind of felt like it needed something else. So I added another layer of patterned paper, because why not? Another layer of patterned paper always makes everything better. And then here what I'm doing is I am going ahead and adhering these things together so that I can kind of move it all as one unit, making sure that I like how it all looks together, because of course I'm going to go and add some mixed media behind all of those layers, and I wanted to make sure I knew where everything would be. So I went ahead and glued it all together. And then my photos, before I glue those down, I am going to mat them on white and then also mat them on black to kind of match everything else. And then I am tracing around that. And my photos, I knew I was going to want to pop up on craft foam, and I wasn't quite ready yet to glue them down or pop them up on craft foam. So I just added a teeny tiny little bit of adhesive behind them to just hold them in place where I knew that I wanted them to go, so that I could trace around them. So that when I go and add my mixed media, it's exactly where I want it. You know, because I'm a messy scrapbooker that's also a little OCD, so I have to make sure that my mixed media is going to go exactly where I want it to go. So those pencil lines are going to help me. And then I took some Distress Oxides to start. So that is fossilized amber and then salvaged patina. And I'm just using my blending brushes. And right now it looks kind of crazy because you don't have the stuff on top. There you go. Now you can kind of see how the pencil lines are helping me make sure I've got everything where I want it to go. And then I add the orange. And then I pulled out some of my shimmers paints. So I'm going to be using, the color I'm using right now is Vibes. It's the Vibes blend. It's mustard. It's a great yellow. Looks perfect with fossilized amber. It's kind of that deeper, more mustardy looking yellow. So it goes perfectly with that color. And then the turquoise or the blue aqua is going to be the Vibes Ginny B Blue. That's one of my favorite colors ever. I love that shade of, it's like a perfect mix of, you know, kind of like a turquoise and an aqua. I don't know. I love that color. So I went ahead and added that. And then the orange, I'm going to be using a Colorings. And the Colorings is just a flat color. So it's just a solid, vibrant color. And that is Orange You Glad. Colorings Orange You Glad. And it's a little darker than I wanted it. And then on the bottom, if you're watching this on a bigger screen, you can kind of see that orange soaked right into the page. That's because when I was adding my Distress Oxide, I went with a baby wipe and kind of wiped off a little bit of the orange ink because I had just overdone it just a little bit. And so I guess because of the baby wipe, the paper being wet, it kind of just soaked in and made big splotchy looking places. So in the end, it doesn't really matter, but that's what was happening there. And then I took this stencil. This is a Simple Stories stencil called Direction Arrows. And I wanted to go ahead and add, I thought the Direction Arrows stencil was perfect because the sketch has triangles that sort of look like they're, you know, pointing in a certain direction, and then the arrows pointing into the title. So I thought that was a perfect thing to go along with what was in the sketch. So these triangles I did cut on my Cricut beforehand, before I started, because I knew I was going to need those. And then also the circle and the other arrows that I'm going to be adding. But before I add any more, I'm going to go ahead and get that picture where it needs to go, because in the sketch you can kind of see that the triangles are layered behind the photo. So I wanted to make sure that I got my photo where I wanted it before I added any more of those arrows. And then in the sketch, I altered it just a little bit, because in the sketch it has 3 photos, and I didn't want 3 photos on here. I wanted 2 photos, and to make 3 photos fit, I would have had to have done the photos a lot smaller, and I wanted you to be able to see them, or I wanted me to be able to see them. When I looked at the page, I wanted to see the people. So I didn't want to do them too small. And really, these were my favorite 2 photos, and I just wanted to use those 2. So I altered the sketch a little bit, but you can totally tell it looks very similar to the sketch for sure. And then I'm using my T-square ruler here just to line up the very edges of those triangles to make sure I got them in a line. I sometimes have a hard time lining things up. I think it looks straight, and then I look at it from above and I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't look right. So my T-square ruler there, just using the corner of the triangle, kind of helped me make sure I got it in the right place. And then that Hooray is from Magical Birthday. And I did use a Posca marker to color in the R. So I did not like the color that it originally was. And so I went ahead and colored it in blue. And then I'm going to change my mind because the blues, I couldn't really match the blues in the pattern papers to the Posca markers that I had. It was a whole thing. So I ended up here, you can see that I went and cut these little arrows again. I had originally cut them in a blue. It was almost like a periwinkle blue, purpley color. I loved that color of patterned paper that I had originally cut over there on the right, but it didn't it didn't work for me when I put it down. And color combinations are important to me, so I needed to make sure that it looked right because it would have driven me crazy. So I went back and cut it on a turquoise pattern paper, and that is a Vicky Bouton pattern paper from a few collections ago. I had a scrap in my scrap drawers that I organized by color, and it was the perfect color to go with the other papers I had picked. So I grabbed that. And then here you can see, I did it off camera, the R on Hooray is now orange, and I will end up adding a few more layers of orange. But that is definitely something that you should never be afraid to do. When you buy something that's already made, like that Hooray was so cute. It was already made. It has gold foiling on it. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to use it, but it wasn't really it didn't have all of the right colors. So I just colored over it and then made it work for my page. And I ended up loving how it looks. So that's just a little tip to help you use some of those things that you have in your stash but are not just right for whatever you're working on. You can always alter them and alter the color a little bit. And then here I'm creating down in the bottom left corner of that sketch, there's a kind of a half circle, and then there was the darker line of paper, so I did that with the hearts. Here I am coloring the orange again to make sure it's a bright orange and that you don't see the blue that I had colored before through there. And then I did my journaling. So the lines on there on the sketch, I wasn't sure if those were supposed to be like stitching or journaling, but I needed a place to add my journaling. So I went ahead and took it as journaling lines and cut very, very teeny tiny thin little strips of some journaling lines there and cut them very carefully because they are really little. And here I had to cut the last one by hand because it was too small to hold with my paper trimmer. But I got those 4 strips, and I am going to kind of offset them from, each line, kind of like one started over to the left, then the next one over to the right a little bit, just like in the sketch. That's exactly what those lines look like. But I do have 4 lines of journaling instead of 3 because I always have more words to say. And then now what I'm going to do is I pulled out some sequins from my stash. I have, I think 4 or 5 boxes of sequins that look like that are all organized by color. So I always usually have the right color of sequins to add. And then here I am adding some liquid pearls to finish off the layout. Those are from Ranger. And that is the final layout. So I had so much fun making this and following that sketch to guide me, and it actually really came together pretty quickly. I love that about sketches, that it kind of takes the guesswork out of it for you, and you don't have to think too hard. You can just create. So that was super fun to do. I hope that you will go and check out all of the other ladies in the SketchHop so that you can see their take on the sketches. And I always love how we see different things in the sketch and the different creative takes that we have on that. So please be sure to go ahead and check those links out in the comment section here, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.